On September 30th, 2022, a sudden storm shook Burkina Faso. In the middle of the night, some young army officers captured the country. They appeared on television and announced that they had removed the old government. At the forefront of this rebellion was a 34-year-old captain, Ibrahim Traoré. Within just a few hours, Traoré became the new president of Burkina Faso. The entire world was surprised. Who is this young soldier? Why did he overthrow the government? And most importantly, where did he want to take Burkina Faso? This story is not only about Traoré's rise, but also about the future of an entire African nation, a nation that has been burning for decades in the fire of poverty, terrorism, and foreign interference. To understand this coup, we have to go back a little in history. Burkina Faso, earlier known as Upper Volta, gained independence from France in 1960. But after independence, the country never found peace. Military coups, weak governments, and foreign exploitation kept pulling it backwards. The most famous leader in Burkina Faso's history was Thomas Sankara, who took power in 1983. Sankara was a revolutionary. He dreamed of making Burkina Faso self-reliant. He changed the country's name from Upper Volta to Burkina Faso, meaning the land of honest people. He promoted education, health, and agriculture. But in 1987, he was assassinated in a coup. It is said that foreign powers were also behind his killing. After Sankara, Burkina Faso fell into the grip of corruption and poverty again. And in the last few years, another crisis surrounded it: terrorism. In the Sahel region of Africa, groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS started spreading rapidly. Burkina Faso became one of the centers of their violence. Thousands of people were killed. Millions were forced to leave their homes. Villages were destroyed. The government appeared helpless. French soldiers stationed there, who were supposed to fight terrorism, were accused of doing nothing. The people started losing faith in their leaders. And in this atmosphere of anger and hopelessness, Ibrahim Traoré appeared. To understand the storm that swept Burkina Faso, we must go back to the roots of its pain. For more than 60 years, Burkina Faso lived under the shadow of its former colonizer, France. Even after independence in 1960, France never truly left. It maintained deep control through currency, military presence, and political influence. Burkina Faso used the CFA franc, a currency directly linked to the French treasury. This meant that the country's economy was never truly independent. French companies controlled the mining sector, especially gold, the nation's most precious resource. While foreign corporations made billions, ordinary Burkinabe citizens lived in extreme poverty. Roads remained broken, hospitals underfunded, and schools without resources that in villages. Farmers worked tirelessly, yet struggled to feed their families. Many young people, seeing no opportunities, joined armed groups or tried to flee the country. Every election seemed to bring leaders who served foreign interests more than their own people. The resentment grew silently year after year. To be why the 2010s, when terrorism began to rise, people started asking, if France has been here for decades, why has nothing improved? Why is there more hunger, more war, and less hope? This colonial legacy became the fuel that ignited anger across Burkina Faso. And when leaders failed, the military began to see itself as the only solution that end this atmosphere. A new name started echoing in whispers. Ibrahim Traoré was not born into power. He grew up in a modest family in western Burkina Faso. From childhood, he witnessed poverty and insecurity around him. That he studied geology at university before joining the military. His decision to become a soldier was not about ambition. It was about survival. Like many Burkinabe youth, he believed only the army could bring stability within the ranks. Traoré was known for his discipline, humility, and courage. He quickly gained respect among his peers. Unlike many officers, he did not seek luxury or political favors. He lived simply and spoke directly as terrorism worsened. Traoré was deployed to some of the most dangerous regions of the country. He saw firsthand the suffering of villagers, the weakness of the government, and the frustration of soldiers fighting with poor equipment. These experiences shaped his worldview. Did he believe that the leadership in Ouagadougou, the capital, was corrupt, weak, and too dependent on France? He began to dream of a new Burkina Faso, one where dignity, sovereignty, and justice would return among fellow soldiers. His determination was inspiring. Slowly, whispers turned into loyalty, and loyalty turned into readiness to follow him, no matter the risk. Before Traoré, another coup had already taken place. That in January 2022, Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Damiba seized power, overthrowing the civilian president. He promised to end terrorism and restore ordered at first. The people celebrated. But soon, disappointment set in. Damiba's policies failed. Attacks increased, villages kept burning, and soldiers continued dying. Even worse, Damiba was accused of being too close to France, that he allowed French troops to remain, fueling suspicions that he was just another puppet. By September 2022, the anger inside the army was boiling. Young officers believed Damiba was betraying the nation. That's when Traoré and his loyal men decided to act. On the night of September 30th, they launched their move. Gunfire erupted in the capital. By dawn, Damiba had fled, and by evening, the world saw the face of a new leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, age 34. When Captain Ibrahim Traoré took power in September 2022, he became the world's youngest head of state at just 34 years old. The announcement shocked the international community. Some called him a rebel, others a revolutionary. But inside Burkina Faso, thousands filled the streets, waving flags and chanting his name. For the people, Traoré symbolized hope. That he was not part of the old political class. He had no ties to corrupt elites. That he was young, fearless, and determined. In his first speeches, Traoré promised to restore security, reclaim sovereignty, and end foreign domination. These words lit a fire in the hearts of millions across Africa. The Traoré's most daring move came soon after taking power. He announced that French troops must leave Burkina Faso. For decades, France had maintained military bases under the excuse of fighting terrorism. But people accused them of secretly fueling instability to maintain control. In early 2023, French forces were officially ordered out. Crowds celebrated in the streets, chanting, "Down with imperialism! Long live sovereignty!" This was not just about soldiers leaving. It was about dignity. It was about a nation finally standing on its own. Traoré also turned to other partners, strengthening ties with Russia, Turkey, and neighboring African states. His message was clear. Burkina Faso will no longer be a slave to its former colonizer. By the year 2022, Burkina Faso was like a pot boiling over. The people were exhausted. The constant terrorist attacks had turned entire regions into ghost towns. Parents were afraid to send their children to school because they could be kidnapped or killed. Farmers abandoned their lands because extremist groups controlled the countryside. Markets that once buzzed with trade became silent. The once vibrant rhythm of Burkinabe life had been replaced with fear. The government, led by President Paul-Henri Damiba, had promised solutions. When he himself came to power through a coup in early 2022, people had placed their hopes in him. He had vowed to restore security and bring peace to the land. But as the months passed, nothing changed. In fact, the situation grew worse. The terrorists expanded their control. The army became demoralized. Soldiers complained they were sent to fight without proper weapons, ammunition, or even food supplies. At the same time, ordinary citizens began to believe that Damiba was not truly fighting for Burkina Faso. Instead, rumors spread that he was too close to the French military, who still operated bases in the region. For many people, France was not seen as a savior, but as a shadowy power keeping the country weak. the anger built up like a storm. Across villages, towns, and even within army barracks, a single question was whispered. If Damaba cannot protect us, then who will? This was the breaking point. People were desperate for change. Not just political change, but a complete revolution of spirit. They wanted a leader who would fight not only with guns, but with courage, vision, and independence. And in this moment of despair, a young captain named Ibrahim Traoré became the symbol of hope. When the whispers of discontent grew louder, one name began to rise above the rest: Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Unlike many in the upper ranks, he was young, only in his mid-30s, and close to the ordinary soldiers. He shared meals with them, listened to their frustrations, and understood their pain because he had lived it alongside them. Traoré had studied geology before joining the army, which meant he understood the land of Burkina Faso, not just its soil and rivers, but the struggles of the farmers who depended on it. To his fellow soldiers, he wasn't just a commander barking orders. He was a brother in arms, someone who fought beside them in the dust and heat of the battlefield. Stories spread of how Traoré would stay at the front lines even when bullets rained down. He was not the kind of officer who hid in the capital while others died in the bush. And in a nation where trust in leaders had collapsed, this courage mattered more than anything. Satisfaction with Damaba peaked. Small groups of soldiers began secretly rallying behind Traoré. They admired his honesty, his youth, and his clear message: we must fight for Burkina Faso with our own hands. No one else will save us. By September 2022, these whispers became a movement. Within the army, conversations turned into plans. The soldiers no longer believed Damaba could defend their homeland. They wanted Traoré to step forward, not as a mere officer, but as the leader who could inspire the entire nation to rise again. The stage was set for another storm in Burkina Faso's history. And this time, the one at its center was a young captain the world had never heard of. On the morning of September 30th, 2022, the streets of Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, fell silent. Then, gunfire echoed in the distance. Smoke rose as military vehicles rolled through the city. Once again, the people sensed that power was shifting. This time, however, the coup was not led by an old general or a distant politician. It was led by Captain Ibrahim Traoré and his loyal comrades. They moved quickly, seizing key military installations and blocking roads. Radio and television stations were taken over. Within hours, the country learned that Damaba had been overthrown. The official reason was clear. Damaba had failed to protect the people from terrorist attacks. Villages were still burning. Thousands of families had fled their homes. Soldiers were dying in battles without support. For many, the coup felt less like a power grab and more like a desperate act of survival. What shocked the world was not just that another coup had happened in Africa, it was who led it. A man so young, practically unknown beyond military circles, had risen to the very top. In a continent where leaders were often old, clinging to power for decades, the arrival of a 30-something captain was nothing short of extraordinary. Crowds poured into the streets, waving flags, cheering, and chanting his name. Traoré. Traoré, Traoré. To the people, he was not just a soldier. He was a symbol of their frustration, their anger, and their hopes for a new beginning. But even as celebrations erupted, questions lingered. Could such a young man, with so little experience in politics, truly guide a nation at war? Once in power, Traoré wasted no time. Standing before cameras, dressed in his military fatigues, he addressed the people of Burkina Faso and the wider world. His words were firm, his tone clear. We have taken responsibility because our country is in danger. Terrorists kill our people daily, and the government has failed. We cannot sit and watch our homeland collapse. For ordinary Burkinabe, these words rang true. Finally, someone was speaking directly about their pain. But for France and other Western powers, it was an alarming sign. Traoré made it clear he was not interested in being anyone's puppet. He questioned the long-standing French presence in Burkina Faso and demanded results, not promises. This boldness shocked international observers. In Paris, policymakers worried. They had counted on Burkina Faso as part of their broader influence in West Africa. Now, a young captain was openly challenging them. At the same time, Traoré began looking elsewhere for support. He praised other African countries that had resisted Western control, and rumors spread of growing ties with Russia, much like Mali next door. The message was unmistakable. Burkina Faso would not bow to old powers. Instead, it would chart its own path, even if that meant breaking away from centuries of dependency. For many Africans across the continent, these words were electrifying. They saw in Traoré not just a national leader, but a symbol of a broader African awakening. Taking power was only the beginning. Governing a broken nation is far more difficult. Traoré inherited a country where schools were closed, hospitals lacked medicine, and more than 2 million people had been displaced from their homes due to terrorism, but he faced enormous pressure on all sides. The terrorists continued their brutal attacks, trying to test the resolve of the new government. The international community was divided. Some condemned the coup, while others watched cautiously. Inside the country, expectations were sky-high. People wanted immediate results, but rebuilding trust and security would take time. Traoré focused on the army first. He called for reforms to give soldiers better equipment, training, and morale. He visited frontline units personally, shaking hands with young recruits and reminding them that they were fighting for their families and their land. He also promised to root out corruption that had drained resources away from the military. But his greatest challenge was not just military, it was social. He had to give people hope again. Across Burkina Faso, he urged citizens to unite, to reject fear, and to believe in their collective strength. In his speeches, he often repeated one phrase: "We are not fighting only with weapons. We are fighting with dignity, with courage, and with faith in our people." This message began to resonate, not just in Burkina Faso, but across Africa. In villages far from the capital, children began drawing pictures of the young captain. In neighboring countries, youth movements praised him as proof that new leadership was possible. By the end of 2022, Ibrahim Traoré had become more than just the leader of Burkina Faso. He had become a symbol of resistance across the African continent. To many, he represented the idea that Africa's youth no longer needed to wait for old leaders or foreign powers to dictate their future. His rise inspired conversations in Ghana, Senegal, Nigeria, and beyond. Could a new generation of Africans, bold and unafraid, finally take control of their own destiny? But with fame came danger. Traoré faced threats from terrorists, political rivals, and even international powers who saw his defiance as a challenge to their influence. His leadership was, and still is, a daily test of survival. Yet, no matter the risks, his image continued to grow. On social media, young Africans shared his speeches. In marketplaces, people wore shirts with his face printed on them. In the eyes of many, he had become not just a captain, not just a president, but a symbol of hope. The story of Ibrahim Traoré is far from over. It is still being written every day in the villages of Burkina Faso, in the hearts of soldiers who march under his orders, and in the minds of young Africans who dream of freedom. And perhaps that is the true power of his rise, not that he became president through a coup, but that he awakened a new generation to believe the future of Africa belongs to us.